Happy Thanksgiving, y'all. The NFL has blessed us with a full slate of games this Thanksgiving, and it's something to be thankful for. With all 32 teams in action this week, roster management is going to be huge. You got to know which guys to put in your lineup and which guys to fade. Welcome to NFL Week 13 Injury Report. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus. What is up, folks? I am your host here, the DGen Doc. And yes, happy Thanksgiving, happy football, happy family. Great times all around. Doing a special early edition, as many of you got plans a little bit later. So recording it Thursday morning based off the Wednesday information, doing the injury report. So not quite typically, we'll do this on Thursday night to make sure I have 2 days of data and kind of get a really good picture. But we got 3 games on Thursday. Want to make sure we get that information out. And Thanksgiving. Gotta change the schedule. So, hey, folks, look, this is the NFL Week 13 Injury Report. If this is your first time joining us, cheers. Thank you. I've been doing this injury report all season. A little bit of a new segment to the channel. Not a little bit. It is a new series, right? This is the main intent. So, way this is going to work, I'm sure you've seen some injury report videos before. Usually kind of just hit the wave tops, tell you kind of what you need to know a little bit, and then it's usually offensive focus. But we're IDP Plus, baby, and we care about the defense. So this is an in-depth analysis of the biggest IDP fantasy players that you got to worry about this week. Now, what I will say is if you've stumbled across this video by accident, or there's a good chance you play both IDP and regular offensive fantasy football, at the end of the video, last 5 minutes or so, I will do an offensive rundown that is quick and dirty and tells you kind of the wave tops of what you need to know for the biggest players like Lamar Jackson, Marvin Harrison Jr., things like that, right? But for the bulk of the show, we are going to do a mainly IDP defensive fantasy focused episode. And without further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off. And let's kick it off with a guy that I want to start the show with some good news, right? It's the holiday season. Always want to be able to do it. Patrick Surtain, the reigning defensive player of the year, a guy who, IDP fantasy wise is somewhat valuable. Maybe not the most because guys just don't throw his way smartly. But he is back at practice. So Pat Surtain was dealing with a pec strain. So this is when we talk about strains, there's different grades, right? So grade just speaks to the severity of the injury, how much muscle fiber damage was in there, how much did we damage that muscle. Grade 1 is kind of minimal, not too much, more of a 1 to 2 week thing for the pec. Grade 2 is, more moderate, more of that micro muscle fiber tearing. About a 3 to 6 week recovery period. And this picture is likely a grade 3, which is a full tear off the bone and requires surgery, is more of a 3 to 6 month season ending type thing. So based on, what the reports were and everything, too severe to be a grade 1, right? Because, he would have been back at practice a little bit longer. But grade 2, kind of that 3 to 6 week is right where he falls in. They didn't put him on IR. Part of the reason is they thought he could come back before the 4 games, and they had their bye week in there, right? So IR, short-term IR, you have to miss 4 games. It's not just 4 weeks, so that would really be 5 weeks of him missing. So that tells us, okay, they think he's got a chance to return. He's already missed 3 weeks. This would be the 4th week, and he started the week with a limited practice. That is typically a great sign for guys coming back, especially off a bye week. The Wednesday practices for teams off a bye week mean a little bit more. Good and bad, right? If a guy doesn't practice coming off a bye week, they've already had a week off. That's not a good sign that they're going to be ready for this week. But if they do get a practice in, that is a good sign. Now, with these longer injuries, sometimes a team takes a week to do a ramp-up week, a la the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and anyone with Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving. But typically with these type of injuries, with pec injuries, once you're able to essentially push, right? Because really your pecs help with the push off. So defensive, offensive linemen, a lot more of what they're doing, but still in the defensive back, you want to be able to make sure you have the full range of motion to get up there and grab the ball and be able to press and kind of, be able to bump with the receiver there. But great sign for Patrick Surtain. So let's continue to watch what his practice is this week. But him practicing today on the Wednesday is a great sign. Now, kicking it over to more of a team setting, because we've got a couple injuries to talk about here. We've got the Arizona Cardinals. And we're going to do a little defensive update here with a couple of their starters. Guys, you want to make sure you're keeping an eye on. So we got defensive tackle, the rookie Walter Nolan, who missed most of the year and then came back and has looked really good, but he's kind of been dinged up. He's got a knee injury. He's someone that he had a defensive touchdown last week. So someone hopefully when he's healthy, you want him in your lineup, right? He's a big playmaker there for that defense. Picking off Trevor Lawrence and running that back for a touchdown. He did not practice today. Outside linebacker Baron Browning did not practice today with a concussion. Outside linebacker Josh Sweat with an eye injury did not practice. And safety Darden Taylor Demerson did not practice with an ankle injury. Now, they're all starters for that defense, all guys who would be eligible to be in your lineups. Wednesday practice for a Sunday game, team not coming off a bye week. You got to take it with a little bit of grain of salt, but obviously, you got to pay attention here. Hey, what's going on? Now, in particular, Baron Browning and safety Dadrian Taylor Demerson, both those guys didn't play last week. So, they've already had all that time off. It's not like they need to recover from the game on Sunday, and them not practicing is a little bit more pessimistic than Walter Nolan and Josh Sweat, who played last week. So with the concussions, we'll touch that really briefly. I'll do more in depth when we get to kind of an individual guy with a concussion. But essentially, you need a limited practice and you need a full practice. So Baron Browning, typically guys usually miss 1 week and then they come back the following week. He already missed last week, so by typical convention, you would expect him to be back this week. Doesn't always happen like that. CJ Stroud's missed multiple weeks, as well as Jalen Petrie. Kind of depends on how, honestly, the team handles it, and then obviously how they're progressing through the protocol. But Baron Browning would need to practice tomorrow to have a shot to play this week. Demerson not practicing is not a great sign. Josh Sweat and Walter Nolan, again, with the just coming off the game and having played the game. Walter Nolan did get knocked out of the game, wasn't able to return, so that's a little bit more concerning. Josh Sweat with the eye injury, I'm not sure exactly when he picked that up. Eye injuries usually are something superficial unless there's something crazy like Najee Harris and he's blowing his face off with the firework. But Walter Nolan and Josh Sweat. I would say Josh Sweat, I probably feel the best about him being able to play. But Walter Nolan, Baron Browning, and Taylor Demerson are real question marks. So you want to make sure you're paying close attention to those injury reports for those guys there. Some good news on the Arizona front, though. Rookie cornerback Will Johnson is back at practice in a limited fashion, but he's back at practice. So that is a great sign, right? He has obviously not practiced for the past several weeks. He's been out, I think, 3 weeks with the back and hip injury. And that was unfortunate because it happened midweek, which means he injured himself in practice, not a game, which can happen, obviously, but you try to prevent as much as you can, especially during the season. But back at practice, good sign. Like I was saying, if you practice on Wednesday, that is usually a great indicator that you're going to be out there and ready to go. The only caution here is it's a multi-week injury. So again, sometimes they need that ramp-up week. So ideally, he practices in full at least Friday, if not tomorrow. If he doesn't have a full practice, that's a little bit concerning that he's only been limited. Sometimes they keep those guys out. So if he has a full practice either Thursday or Friday, feel good to go. Put him in your lineup. He's another rookie that's impressed when he's been out there. But if he's only doing limited, I make sure you have a backup plan for him. Okay, moving along here. Let's go Carolina Panthers. Two of their best players in Christian Roseboom, their leading tackler in the inside linebacker spot, and cornerback J.C. Horn with a concussion. Now, both no practice, both major pieces of the defense, both different injuries, right? So Roseboom with the hip, he did not play last week, and the fact he didn't practice again this week to start the week, not a great sign. Doesn't mean anything definite. Again, typically why I do this on Thursdays is because he didn't practice Wednesday and Thursday. We can almost rule him out, right? But if he comes back to practice on Thursday, and is able to get full practice in Friday, he could be good to go. So not ready to quite rule him out, but is not a good sign. A guy who did not play the last week, not kind of at least getting a limited practice in this week. And then J.C. Horn, he got knocked out mid-game. J.C. Horn, man, what an incredible player. Hopefully you had him in your lineup because even though he played one half, 2 interceptions off Brock Purdy. Just an absolute stud. One of them was, I mean, the dude was wide open. I believe it was Ricky Pearsall, and he got off of his read and just kind of went and found the ball. And incredible play by JC Horn. So he is an incredible player there, but he's dealing with a concussion. Now, concussion, still a lot to figure out from a medical and how to handle it side of view. Obviously, the NFL is kind of changing and with that. But essentially, what we know, it is a disruption to the energy systems of the brain. And really, when we talk about in football sense, it mostly negatively affects your decision making and your processing time. Now, most of us have played the game of football, or at least know the game of football if you're watching this. So it's an ever changing environment. It's an unpredictable environment. You have to be able to react extremely quickly. So to put someone out there when those things are compromised is a big disadvantage. We want to make sure you're fully ready to go. Now, couple years ago, it was very commonplace for a guy to get a concussion on Sunday and to be able to clear the concussion protocol by the next week and play. Past couple years, especially early on in the season, that's been very, very rare. Now, around this time, a couple weeks ago, it is not impossible. We have seen on numerous occasions people get a concussion on Sunday, be able to practice on Thursday, practice in full on Friday, and play in the game. That is kind of a little bit of the minority at this point. At this point, just in the year 2025, the past couple of years we've seen. So he didn't practice today. He would have to practice tomorrow, and then limited fashion, and then a full practice Friday to be able to clear. So essentially, I would say if both these guys don't practice today, which is Thursday, we'll find out in a couple hours. It's safe to say they're not going to be out there. All right, which would be huge. Obviously, Horn coming off a concussion, there's no real production dip. So if Horn is able to play this week, put him in your lineup. Definitely someone you want out there. All right, moving on to a Buffalo Bill, which is Terrel Bernard. Unfortunately, don't have a great feeling about this one. He got banged up, took an awkward hit during the Thursday night football game. And, he reappeared on the sideline with the sling. They're calling it an elbow injury. No practice today, for a couple things. One, injured in the game and had to be in a sling. Two, they technically have that mini bye week, right? You got 10 days from the Thursday to the Sunday. So he's already had more time off. Wednesday, if he was going to play this week, you would kind of expect him to be out there. So I don't have a great feeling about Terrel Bernard. Now, I think if it was a full-on elbow dislocation, I think we would have gotten that information already, and they probably would have been an IR candidate. Now, who knows? Maybe sometimes teams wait to, this is just showing all the different types of dislocations you can have, which essentially is just any dislocation, the bones aren't where they're supposed to be, right? They're displaced from the joint. Now, just because they haven't put on IR yet, doesn't mean they're not going to. Sometimes teams wait until a couple days throughout the week to do some roster management of themselves or just kind of see how this injury is developing. But for this week, the sling, getting injured in the game, and no practice to start the week, not a great sign. I'd call him squarely doubtful, and that is Terrel Bernard for this week. Okay, moving on to the Chicago Bears here. We're going to do a little bit of good and bad. So the good, we have the DBs potentially coming back from injured reserve. That is Kyler Gordon with a calf injury and Jaylon Johnson with a groin injury. They both started practicing last week, but it was, again, especially off IR, those bigger injuries, multi-week absences. Sometimes we see a ramp-up week, and that's what we saw last week with both Gordon and Johnson. But back-to-back full practices here to start the week. We have a little bit more data on them. They play in the Black Friday game on Friday against the Eagles. So back-to-back practices in full. I think there's a strong case they're going to be activated off IR and be able to play, which is good news because Tyreek Stevenson went down last game against who did they play? Jeez, drawing a blank on who the Browns played, or excuse me, not the Browns, the Bears played last week that they eked out. Oh, the Steelers. Yes, against the Steelers. So a couple other guys more. We talked about the good in Johnson and Gordon. Talking about the bad real quick. Look, this linebacker core has been decimated. Terrell Edmonds has already been put on the IR. TJ Edwards has been out several weeks, and then Noah Sewell missed last week. TJ Edwards with the hamstring, Noah Sewell with the elbow, and Tyreek Stevenson with the hip. Back-to-back days of no practice. Edwards has now been a multi-week, 3+ week injury. Sewell wasn't out there last week, so now we're on week 2. Tyreek Stevenson got injured in the game. The fact that neither of them have practiced at all, not a great sign for this week. Not 100% that rules him out, especially Stevenson. If it's one of those things, he just need a couple days off and could bounce back. But at this point, all of them are squarely doubtful. It's typical NFL injury flow. Missed 2 days in a row, unless it's something minor. Usually, that is not a great indication, and most of those guys missed this week. So, unfortunately, I do think those guys are all going to be out. All right, moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals as they play tonight, Thursday night, against the division rival Baltimore Ravens. Unfortunately, no Trey Hendrickson again this week. Man, that coach talk, you got to be careful because, again, I talked about it last week, talked about it this week. Got ruled out with that hip injury. He had a hip injury earlier in the year. He then played. He got it aggravated against the Bears several weeks ago. They had a Thursday night game that next week. Zach Taylor said, hey, it's kind of a minor thing. He may not be out there on the short week, but, it definitely won't be out too long. That was 4 weeks ago. So he hasn't even practiced yet. So whatever's going on there, it was a back, that was a hip. They didn't really disclose much, but he hasn't been put on IR. It's kind of a weird situation going on. I mean, we all know the whole deal and not, him not getting the time in training camp because he was holding out, which is never a good sign, right? We've seen a couple of those holdouts, whether it's Najee Harris due to, that was more of the eye thing, whether it's, Micah Parsons was beat up, Trey Hendrickson now. When guys miss extended periods of training camp for whatever reason, not a great sign, right? There's working out on your own, and there's playing football, right, with other professional athletes. It's really hard to replicate in the gym. Okay, going to another guy with the Browns here in Cleveland, with the Shadur-led Cleveland Browns. Shout out to him for getting his first win for them. First time in 26 years that a rookie for them got his first start. Quarterback Denzel Ward dealing with a migraine. This is a bit of an interesting one. No practice today. Again, Wednesday practice reports for a Sunday game. You take it with a grain of salt. But migraines, I guess they can affect all kind of people differently. Typically, this is kind of like a couple days thing. But now we just saw Cowboy safety Wanye Thomas got put on the IR for migraines. So this can clearly be a debilitating thing that has a lot of severities similar to concussions almost. So just one to watch. Don't have a lot of information there on exactly what kind of migraine he's dealing with. But it is something to note for them to miss a practice due to it. It is only a Wednesday, so he could be out there Thursday, Friday and be fine. But definitely Ward, better player for Cleveland, something you want to pay attention to there. All right, moving on to the Detroit Lions secondary safety Kerby Joseph, not played in or really even practiced in the past several weeks there, since he got banged up against, I believe, the Bucks. It might have been the Chiefs. Actually, I think it was the Chiefs game. But he's been out for several weeks, has not practiced. No, why they didn't put him on the IR. He's been rolled out for this week, so he will not be playing today against the Packers, obviously. And really, I mean, there's Dan Campbell said he's progressing, but we've seen no actual on-field progression yet. All right, sticking with the Detroit Lions there, let's talk about their cornerback, Terrion Arnold, the second-year player out of Alabama. He is dealing with a concussion. Now, he already missed last week. Questionable for Thursday. He was at practice this week to start the week, so there is a chance he gets activated because it's a Thursday short week game. Typically, I'll say from what I've seen, when they put a guy's questionable with a concussion, typically he plays. Now, it's not all the time, but usually if he's not going to play, they'll rule him out beforehand. So if they're trying to give him all the time in the world to be able to clear, typically those guys do play. So one to watch. We'll know in a couple hours here. Actually, the first game, so we'll know in I'm recording this 10 local time recording this. So, I mean, we'll know in about 30, 45 minutes if he's going to be able to go. All right. Now, the Packers moving on to the team Detroit is going to play this week. A couple guys for them that are all questionable, all starters on that defense that I wanted to touch on here. Linebacker Quay Walker, cornerback Nate. Let me move this here. Quarterback Nate Hobbs and cornerback Keyshawn Nixon. All of them are questionable this week. All of them have been banged up. Keyshawn Nixon got knocked out of the game last week. Hobbs has missed several weeks, and Quay Walker missed last week with the neck injury. They were all practiced in somewhat. These are really, I don't have a ton to say because they're really all true question marks here. I'd say the neck injury for Walker always, if you've listened to any of these, neck injuries in football don't mix. So I do not like that. But the fact that he's already back at practice is a good sign. They did call Quay Walker's a stinger, which usually with the stinger, guys may only miss 1, maybe 2 weeks. So I think he has a chance to be back if it is truly that stinger, that nerve irritation there in the neck and the shoulder. Hobbs has been out several weeks, but he's been back at practice for now 2 weeks. So he's got a shot. And then Keyshawn Nixon, depending if it was just a low ankle sprain instead of a high ankle sprain, which with him having a chance to play this week, I would say it's a low ankle sprain. Really, guys, these all guys are 50-50, right? So let's pay attention to see if these guys are active and if they're able to play. I do think that's going to be a bit of a defensive battle there between the Packers and the Lions in that rivalry game. Huge implications on the line for that NFC North. Okay, a guy who is still not at practice for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Travon Walker. Really former first-round pick, a stud for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has missed the past couple weeks and not been at practice, so it's not a great sign that he's not back at practice on Wednesday. Typically, those guys who are dealing with multi-week injuries, they keep them out, and if they're going to play that next week, they at least kind of get a limited practice in on Wednesday. This is one of those where just knee, we don't get a lot of information. The NFL, they only have to say body part, where did they practice, limited or full. And limited, as I've talked about, is like could be one snap or it could be all but one snap, right? It's kind of a wide spectrum. So don't have a ton of information there, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. All right, a guy who hopefully is returning, Ahkello Witherspoon. He fractured his collarbone. Your clavicle here connects your shoulder and your chest essentially. But fractures are the good and bad. The bad is you can't rush it. You have to allow bones to heal. There's time time is really the best thing for bones. Good news is when they're back, they're back. Once you're cleared to take contact, you're pretty much good to go, right? You get a little bit of a cardio warm up or ramp up, whatever. But he had a full practice today, which is a great sign on a Wednesday that he's going to be activated this week. So Ahkello Witherspoon, I do expect him to be back, which is good because this Rams secondary is potentially going to be a little bit thin. They've already lost Quentin Lake had to put him on the IR. Now Cam Kitchens, the other safety, is dealing with a shoulder injury, and outside linebacker Byron Young dealing with the knee injury. Neither of those defensive starters practiced today. Wednesday practice report, I believe both those guys finished the game last week. So again, one of those, let's take it with a grain of salt. Not too concerned yet. If they have back-to-back no practices, obviously that raises my concern. If they're back at practice, even in a limited fashion today, Thursday, feel good about them playing. So it's one of those that Thursday is really key for them. Okay, another pair of defensive starters that did not practice this week. That is Kayvon Thibodeaux, outside linebacker for the New York Football Giants, and Dexter Lawrence with an elbow injury. Now, Thibodeaux has been a multi-week absence. They haven't said anything other than shoulder. They haven't really given us much of what's going on there. Kind of a surprise injury because it was one of those like, when did this happen? He really didn't come out of the game or get ruled out. So, but he's missed the past several weeks. So him not practicing. Now, today's only Wednesday. They play on Monday. So they did hold a practice today, but they are not required to put out an injury report. This was just Kafka saying neither Thibodeaux or Lawrence were going to practice today. They still have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So let's see how that develops there. Dexter Lawrence, the concern with the elbow is this is the same elbow that he had surgery on last year and knocked him out for the rest of the season. Dexter Lawrence, as much as it pains me to say as a Giants fan, has not looked the same, and he's not put up the same stats. So if you have him, you're probably understandably frustrated. So whether he plays this week or not, obviously he's dealing with this elbow thing. Probably someone you want to pivot off of. As crazy it is to say, I think when healthy, Dexter Lawrence is a top 3 interior defensive tackle in the league, but clearly not healthy. I know he's getting double team, triple team at a crazy rate, but he's just not had that same impact. And maybe it's obviously it's the elbow that's bothering him. So whether he plays or not, I would be a bit pessimistic on Dexter Lawrence there. All right, moving to the Eagles. The second round pick, rookie Andrew Mukuba out of Texas, safety. He had an ankle fracture. He kind of took some friendly fire there from other safety Sidney Brown. He was placed on the IR, and it is likely going to be season ending. Typically, when we talk about the fracture, you need, his surgery is required about 2 to 3 months. So I think they're just saying like likely season ending to hold out the really minor chance, that the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl and he's ready to go, right? Because it would basically be he'd have to be on the front end of his rehab timeline, so he'd have to be doing very well, and then obviously all the things would have to fall into place with the Eagles making the Super Bowl. But for fantasy purposes and likely real football purposes, he's going to be out for the season. And then for the other Eagles, a couple other players as well. Both guys limited this week, a chance to play, questionable. This is going to be Brandon Graham, who came back off the couch for the Eagles with a groin injury, and then Reed Blankenship. He got rolled out last week with what they're calling a thigh and now a knee injury. The fact that he's back at practice has a chance to play tells me it's probably more of a contusion type, which is just a fancy word for a bruise, and more of like a dead leg situation than an actual true injury. So he probably has a good chance to play this week. The Brandon Graham not having the full training camp and having to come off the couch and kind of not being in the best shape and having to get back in shape type of deal. The groin injury worries me a little bit more. That's already bothering him, and I don't know. They might be more cautious essentially with him. But I would say Blankenship has a better chance than Graham to be able to play. But both of them have a shot to go this week. All right. Seems like every week I'm talking about some San Francisco 49ers. They just cannot catch a break on the injury front. I've got 2 here today. First up, defensive end Sam Okuayinonu. Yeah, I butchered that, man. Sorry. Sam O, defensive end for the San Francisco 49ers. No shot he's going to ever watch this or hear this, but in case he does, apologies. Did not mean to butcher your last name. High ankle sprain. So we've got the inversion low ankle sprain, which is the typical ones we think about when we, roll our ankle playing basketball or something like that. Those are minor 1 to 2 week things, pretty easy. This is a high ankle sprain. It's technically above the ankle. It's the ligaments that are connected between your 2 lower leg bones in your tibia and your fibula. They are what we call a syndesmosis, right? So it's basically like almost think of it like a mesh netting of connective tissue or ligaments. They're harder to injure, which means they require more force and more damage. So when they are injured, much more harder recovery. Even in the mild sense, 4 to 6 weeks. Most of these guys miss at least 3 weeks, if not 4. So, he's expected to be out for at least a month. And then a guy coming back from this same type of similar injury is going to be Tatum Bethune, the guy who is admirably stepped in for Fred Warner after his season-ending injury. He's no practice today, likely going to be out another 2, if not 3 weeks there for Bethune. So don't expect him back there. A guy who's been, again, a stud for this team. Now, going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here to wrap up the defensive side of the ball. Outside linebacker Son Reddick and cornerback Jamel Dean. Reddick's missed multiple weeks, and Jamel Dean missed last week after getting knocked out of the game against Buffalo. Good signs here. Wednesday practice. Both of these guys returning this week. Like I've said all episode, if you practice on that Wednesday for a Sunday game, that's a very good sign that you're going to be able to play this week. The concern here with Reddick is that multi-week absence. We've seen Todd Bowles with Bucky Irving, with Chris Godwin. They've taken 1, if not 2 weeks to ramp up. So he's pretty conservative about throwing guys out there. So really good sign for Dean, and it is a good sign for Reddick. But Reddick, I'm a little bit more cautiously optimistic that he plays this week, but I do think Dean is going to be able to give it a go. Okay, if you are just here for the defensive side of the ball, released, good to go. Go enjoy your Thanksgiving. Give me a like and a subscribe on the way out if you enjoyed the show. But I'm going to do an offensive rundown here. as promised at the top of the episode, we're going to talk about some offense. It's going to be a lot less in depth and quick and dirty so we can get out of here. All right. Arizona Cardinals wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. there. He had the appendectomy, got his appendix removed, right? Typically, guys miss 1 to 2 weeks. He's missed 2 weeks. He's back at practice. A good sign that he's going to play this week. Drake London, he has been called doubtful for this week with the knee injury. I was kind of expecting this. This is a PCL injury. PCL injuries are very difficult to return from. It's what Ricky Pearsall was dealing with all year. It's what Puka Nakua was dealing with last year. These are tough to come back from. I wouldn't expect him this week and potentially not next week as well. Next up, we have Joe Burrow. Full practices all week, activated off IR. Joe Burrow's back, baby. And, no T. Higgins is going to be out there, but Joe Burrow is going to play. You got to say you can trust him going up against the Ravens defense. He always goes off against them. Now, T. Higgins, on the other hand, he's got a concussion on a short week, basically impossible for him to kind of be able to clear the protocol in time, so he has already been ruled out. Then we've got former MVP Josh Allen. He got banged up. He got sacked 8 times. He's dealing with an elbow injury, but coming off that mini bye, he was a full practice today, so he's going to be out there this week. Another guy who's likely going to return to the field or be back this week just be out there this week. CJ Stroud, full participant. He's been off 3 games now for a concussion. Very unusual, but he had a full practice today. I fully expect him back this week. All right, wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's coming back from his high ankle sprain. He's missed 2 weeks. He's in limited practice today. It's a good chance he's back. But again, those high ankles are tough. So it's only the 3rd week. I'd not be shocked if he doesn't play. But the fact he's practicing Thursday means, I think he's got a good shot to return. All right, another guy coming back from a guy, Omarion Hampton, that they said was just a high ankle sprain, but he actually had an ankle fracture, which is a lot more that 2 to 3 month recovery timeline. He's back at practice yesterday, that was, with a chance to play. He might need a ramp up week coming back from a major injury. Just kind of depends on how much he's been able to do off the field, but it's a good sign that he's going to be back at least soon for Marion Hampton. Alvin Kamara, doubtful this week. No practice with he kind of got rolled up on a pretty nasty, awkward tackle there. Devin Neal looks like he may get the chance to be the RB1 with Kendre Miller out for the season. So no practice yesterday on Wednesday for Kamara. I'd say call him doubtful for this week. And then a guy who's going to return, Jackson Dart, rookie quarterback there. Full participant in practice on Wednesday for a Monday game. It would be very, very strange if he did not clear protocol, so he should be good to go. And then Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving is a full participant in practice on Wednesday again. A guy who's been out for most of the season with the foot injury and the shoulder injury. Got to expect that he's going to be able to ready to roll and go against this Cardinals defense that's pretty beat up on the defensive side of the ball. And then finally, Jaden Daniels. He is back at practice this week, but he's expected to not play this week and have a shot to play next week. They're going to probably... the season's pretty much lost for the Commanders. They're about to be eliminated from playoff contention. They want to be careful with their prized franchise quarterback. But the sign is that he's back in practice. He's going to return this year, and it's likely going to be next week. All right, folks. Let's get on out of here. Hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Tons of football. Let wish you well. Not just in the day, then your fantasy matchups, that hopefully you can take some of this information and make the right moves roster-wise. Typically, again, this is on Thursday nights. I'll get this out because I have a lot more information, but it's the holidays. Got to make adjustments. Family comes first. But Roger Goodell gave us a full slate of games. Nobody's on bye, so let's appreciate these men taking some time from their family and holidays and giving us some entertainment while we're with ours. But hey, from the DJ Doc here on IDP Plus, I am out of here.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.